Welcome Wargamers, my name is Doug with 2+ Stuff, and today we are doing a review of the Start Collecting Goreblade Warband box for the Blades of Khorne. I'm very excited about this one because it's been out for a while and it's actually still one of my favorite Start Collecting sets that GW has produced. And in this video, we're going to be discovering, what units it comes with. We're going to explore the Warscrolls one by one, of course, and then talking about the value of the box and is it a good place to get started for a Khorne army. So without further ado, let's dig in. In the Khorne Bloodbound Goreblade Warband, my goodness, that is a mouthful, Start Collecting box, you will receive 1 Mighty Lord of Khorne, 10 Bloodreavers, 5 Blood Warriors, a Bloodsecrator, a Bloodstoker, and a Khorgorath. Now, from a bird's eye view, this is a ton of models, and it's actually one of the things I love about the box. Like in terms of dollar per model value, this is actually one of the best Start Collecting that there is. You get a few things that are easy to paint in terms of, well, there's a lot of flesh, which if you're new to painting, just contrast on that flesh and it will look really, really nice. Then there's also like, it introduces you to the faction in a very interesting way, which is get used to the word blood being in every flippin' thing. And there's also some cool things that if you really look at the models, they're in these poses that make them very, very interesting to paint. Meaning a lot of the Khorne stuff, their arms are out, to the sides, which makes things like painting the chest very, very easy. You're not going to have a whole lot of kind of buried cracks and crevices. So it's very new painter friendly is kind of what I'm getting at. And you'll be able to paint things like the very ornate armor plates and things like that that really stand out as being Khorne-like. And so with the contents out of the way, let's dive into the unit, starting with the Mighty Lord of Khorne. Now I wanted to start here simply because Khorne is an interesting faction where the heroes set up a ton of synergies that the rest of the army benefits from, more so than any faction. Like there's other factions, of course, that do this, and heroes generally play an important role in an army across every faction, but for Khorne, it's a bit more than that. Mighty Lord of Khorne here, we have a single model. He has a 5-inch move, 6 wounds, 9 bravery, which doesn't come into play a whole lot, and a 3-up save, actually one of the best saves in the faction. He's rocking 2 weapons. He has the Axe of Khorne, which is probably one of the coolest things ever, so just hold on, put a pin in that. It's got 3 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, so it's not a lot, and then D3 damage. In addition to that, he also has his little flesh hound with him, his little doggy that walks with him, and that dog has some claws. So 4 attacks, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. Now what's cool is he does get some of the abilities from having a flesh hound with him. So Collar of Khorne is an interesting one where this model can attempt to unbind 1 spell in the same in the enemy hero phase in the same manner as a wizard. In addition, this model can attempt to dispel 1 endless spell at the start of your hero phase in the same manner as a wizard. So instantly we're seeing there are a lot of heroes in this army that they're not wizards, Khorne hates magic, but they do have the ability to unbind. So they have some play in the hero phase, which is very cool. Now, one thing we're going to talk about here is the reality splitting axe. And that's what I talked about earlier with the Axe of Khorne. The profile is not the whole story. At the end of any phase, if any wounds inflicted by the Axe of Khorne in that phase were allocated to an enemy model, and not negated, and that model has not been slain. So if you hurt anybody, if you nick anybody with this axe, roll a dice. On a 5-up, that enemy model is slain. And so this is one of the few instances in this game where you have like insta-kill, right? Where you can just go nuts. And he has taken out large pieces for me. I had my Glotkin go down to that once. And then it's just other stuff like multi-wound. Slaves to Darkness don't want to lose a knight or anything like that because they put 1 wound on them. And so it can be quite a powerful ability. And rounding off his war scroll is the command ability, Gore Lord, which is the coolest name ever. You can use this command ability at the start of the charge phase. If you do so, pick a friendly model with this command ability until the end of that phase. You can reroll charge rolls for friendly Khorne mortal units wholly within 16 inches of that model when the charge roll is made. And so that is an important one where he basically gets reroll to charges, which there's almost no run in charge in Khorne, but rerolling charges is very, very important. And so we're going to move on to the next hero here, which is the Bloodsecrator. Let me blow this up here. There we go. Okay, so the Bloodsecrator, now we're getting into that kind of echelon of Khorne where there's a whole host of like secondary, like small cheap heroes, but they all contribute very, very important buffs or enhancements or augmentations to your army that you're going to really want. So this is a huge piece of the Khorne puzzle. Let's dig into it. So he has a 4-inch move, so he's a chunky boy. He's not going fast. He has 5 wounds, 9 bravery, and a 3-up save. Again, really good save for this army. Now, he has an ensorcelled axe, which is 4 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. Now, it's a pretty standard low-level hero sort of thing. What makes him interesting, though, are his 2 abilities. First one, Loathsome Sorcery. Reroll successful casting rolls for wizards within 16 inches of this model before any unbinding rolls are made. That is brutal, friends. So many armies now, they focus on, spell casting or unbinding. Now we have things like Teclis where he can just, auto pass on a 10 and that kind of thing. Having someone forced to reroll a successful casting spell, even if they have all these buffs to it, I guess Teclis wouldn't be affected, but I'm more thinking honestly like Nagash, that kind of thing, where all of a sudden, even if he has +3, you're just giving him more opportunities to fail. That really cannot be understated, and it really does hurt all the armies who aren't massive spell casting, and so it does have a lot of place on the battlefield. Now, the second ability is also awesome, which is Rage of Khorne. Add 1 to the attack's characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly Khorne units while they are wholly within 16 inches of any models with this ability. Now, we're going to talk about this here at the end as well, but the truth of the matter is this is why you take the Bloodsecrator. When we talk about the value of this box, I'll bring it up again, but he is kind of one of the centerpieces of this entire army. And so he really is quite incredible for that. Now, one thing that I want to note here to make very, very clear is that it does say add 1 to the attack's characteristic of melee weapons. That does include things like your mount or the Mighty Lord of Khorne's, little doggo buddy. Anytime there's a weapon profile that has melee on it, they get +1 to their attack. That means more opportunities for the reality splitting axe and everything that we're going to talk about next. So now we're going to move on to the Bloodstoker. He is still the only fat Khorne model, and that's why I love him. He's a chunky dude. So he has a movement of 6, 5 wounds, 8 bravery, and a 4-up save. And again, he's one of those kind of like low-level heroes that just really adds a bit of synergy to the army. Now, again, his profile, he has a whip and a stabber thingy. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you, friends. You don't want him in combat. He's a lover, not a fighter. He's got the body for it too. So his ability that you do want to take him for is at the start of the movement phase, you can pick one other friendly Khorne mortal unit wholly within 8 inches of this model. Until your next movement phase, you can add 3 inches to run and charge rolls for that unit. In addition, until your next movement phase, you can reroll wound rolls for attacks made by that unit. A unit cannot be picked to benefit more than one. So if you take more than one of these guys, you can't just like supercharge one dude. Now, this is a really, he's not taken a ton because not everyone really digs him. For me, I love this model because that +3 to your charge does stack with the Mighty Lord of Khorne's reroll charges. And so you get all these opportunities to do long bomb charges, which is kind of my favorite thing, where you just go further than your opponent is kind of ready for you to go to. And then kind of putting that in your mind because that's how you're going to play these opening games for this army. Now, one thing that people often forget, and I am totally guilty of this myself, is forgetting that second part of his ability where you get to reroll wound rolls for attacks made by that unit. So if you put all these things together, right, with what you get just in this box alone, you get your general, who can, I'm assuming Mighty Lord of Khorne because he's kind of the baller, right? He's going to give units around him reroll charge rolls. And then you have the Bloodstoker, who's going to say, hey, everybody gets +1 attack to each one of their melee profiles. And then you have I meant the Bloodsecrator before. Now we have the Bloodstoker, who's letting you charge an additional 3 inches or run. If you just need to get up there, that's fine. And you can re-roll wound rolls. So all those extra attacks you're getting from the Bloodstoker now get to re-roll. And I think that is really, really awesome. Get to re-roll all those wound rolls. Again, it's the easiest thing to forget because it's kind of a jumbled mess when you start stacking all these things. It can kind of be overwhelming when you're new. but the results are awesome. Now that we've gotten the heroes and the synergies and that kind of stuff out of the way, we're going to move into the basic bros. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of the Khorne units on paper do not seem super exciting. And the reason is because they have this big toolbox of heroes that add synergies and add buffs to them and all these things that kind of level them up. What you get is a whole bunch of mediocre units that can swing way above their weight class for a turn or two. It's a very melee-centric, very heavily aggressive army. And so we're going to look at the most basic troop that they have, the Bloodreavers. Keep in mind, in the box, you get 10 of these guys. They have a 6-inch move, only 1 wound each, bravery 5, and a 6-up save, which means they are made of paper and prayer. One model can be the chieftain, he gets an extra attack. The other one can be an icon bearer, so what that means is you add 1 to the bravery characteristic for any icon bearers, and so they're functionally bravery 6. As far as their weapons go, I know I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, I apologize, but they're Reaver blades. Basically you have to pick one of these. You either get a Reaver blade or a Ripper axe. So you Reaver blade, you get attack 1, 4 to hit, 4 to wound, no rend and 1 damage, or the Meat Ripper axe, which is basically the same profile except you get a 1 rend. So you're asking yourself, why would I ever take the Reaper blades because they don't have rend? Well, there is an ability down here called Reaver blades. You can reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made with those, and so you're kind of trading off. Do I want reroll 1 attacks with my stuff, or do I want that rend? And so generally speaking, rend tends to win out on that one unless you're like specifically trying to flood your enemy with like cheap low-level wounds and just kind of force them to shrug them all. They also have a horn blower, which 1 in every 10 models can be one of those, and you add 1 to run and charge rolls for this unit while it includes 1. And of course that does stack with the oh my gosh, all these blood names, the Bloodstokers, +3 to run and +3 to charge. Now that doesn't mean you can run and charge, it just means either one of those options. These guys are going to be moving 4 inches if you use it on them. But one of the things that made this unit stand out in the beginning was the Frenzied Devotion. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this unit's melee weapons while this unit is wholly within 16 inches of any friendly Khorne totems. Those are very interesting keywords. Now we're going to go back to our Bloodsecrator, and he does in fact have the Khorne and totem keyword. So what this means, friends, is that he is giving them +1 attack for being wholly within 16 inches, and also they inherently, just by being near a totem, get +1 attack. So your basic dude, if you have a Bloodsecrator near a unit of Bloodreavers, is going to be 3 attacks base, because you get their 1 that they start with, +1 for the Bloodsecrator, +1 for their Frenzied Devotion ability. And so that is the kind of thing where I'm talking about, where on paper you're like, this guy seems super lame, and you know what, he is. However, all the support structure in a Khorne army goes to making that guy, like I said, punch well above his weight class. Now moving on to one of my personal favorite units, we're going to take a look at the Blood Warriors. Now, these guys, they have a 5-inch move, they have 2 wounds each, so they're much more like a Chaos Warrior, a little more tanky, a little more survivable. They come in units of 5, bravery 6, and a 4-up save. So all of those things are pretty respectable. I mean, those are great basic troops. They're not quite as expendable as the Bloodreavers, however, they stay on the table longer and can survive more than, say, well, anything lower than them. Now, their weapon setup is a little bit weird and wordy because it's kind of one of the older kits that was out there, but a unit of Blood Warriors is armed with one of the following options: a pair of Gore Axes, or a Gore Axe and a Gore Fist, and 1 in every 10 models can replace the unit's weapon option with a Gore Glaive. Again, a lot of options there. We're going to walk through this real quick. So if you have a Gore Axe, at least one of them, you get access to this weapon profile, which is 1 inch, 2 attacks. Again, that goes up to 3 if you're near a Bloodsecrator. 3s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. So very much like a basic weapon. In fact, that's pretty much what a Chaos Warrior is. Now, the Gore Glaive, remember, 1 in every 10 models can take this, is 2 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and 2 damage. So you get kind of like a finishing move for every 10 models that you take in the unit. Now, we're talking about what the unit actually does is much more interesting, because all the abilities and stuff are what make this so intriguing. They have a champion who can just add 1 to attacks for his Gore Axes. That's pretty common. Icon bearers just add 1 to bravery, not a problem. But no respite is probably their signature move. And that one is if a model from this unit is slain in the combat phase before that model is removed from play, that model can make a pile-in move and then attack with all of its melee weapons it is armed with. Now that's incredible. Like, honestly, it is quite good, because what that means is every time you take a hit and you're losing a guy, they get one final chance to swing back. Now that can really sully your opponent's plans to hold an objective. For example, if I have 5 Blood Warriors on an objective, you charge at me and you kill 3, those 3 then kill enough of your guys, there is a very real possibility that I will hold that objective even though I'm the one who suffered more losses. Because as I take those losses, I'm punching you right back. And since all of the buffs that we talked about with our heroes kind of continue until the next hero phase, you can see that all of a sudden you're hitting these guys who are supercharged to punch you right back before you take them off the table. Now, if you decided to arm them all with double gore axes, you get pretty much the same ability that the Bloodreavers had, which is reroll hit rolls of 1. Seeing as how the hit roll on these guys is 3, no matter what weapon you're taking, obviously it's on the gore axes. The truth is, that's not a bad option. You know, I don't mind that at all, especially if you are going to use the Bloodstoker to give them reroll wound rolls. That would be a really smart move. Lots of rerolls, lots of increased opportunities to do damage, and all those things keep going even if you are the one being attacked in your opponent's turn. And their last ability is Gore Fist. If an unmodified save roll for an attack made with a melee weapon that targets a unit that includes any models armed with a Gore Axe and Gore Fist is 6, the attacking unit suffers 1 mortal wound. So now all of a sudden, as you're attacking me, if I make a save roll of a 6, and they have 2 wounds each, there's plenty of save rolls they can make. All of a sudden, you're now taking damage, on top of the fact that when that person dies with the Gore Fist, or, you know, what do they call it? Yeah, it is the Gore Fist. They get to swing back. So all those things kind of stack together. All in all, I love this unit. I actually probably prefer Blood Warriors over Bloodreavers, because I, as a player, am someone who values like staying power. So they can sit on an objective, they can out attrition an enemy. They're not like this all-star rock unit that's just going to take on the world, but they are a very solid battle line option to fill out your ranks with people who can just sit, capture objectives, and just kind of be a bigger nuisance for your opponent than they are expecting. And now we come to my favorite, and it is the Khorgorath. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The Khorgorath is cool to me for 1, the model, and 2, the backstory behind him. Absolutely love this guy. You don't see him a whole lot on the tabletop because he kind of fits into this weird place where he's just big enough to be expensive, but he's not big enough to be impactful in a way that you'd be like, oh man, I got to jam a Khorgorath in there. He has a movement of 6, 8 wounds, bravery 6, and a 4-up save. Now, he does have the only missile weapon in this entire set, which is a 6-inch. Basically, he throws bones at you. He 3 attacks with that one, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. And remember, that's a nice to have, not something you would ever want to rely on. Also, keep in mind, in Age of Sigmar, you can shoot in melee as long as you are shooting the person that you are engaged with. And so that does matter. It just gives you 1 extra attack on somebody. In addition to that, he has the melee weapons, a 1-inch range Claws and Fang, which is 5 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and 2 damage. As far as abilities go, he has Horrific Predators. Add 1 to battle shock rolls for units that had any model slain by attacks made by Khorgoraths in the same turn. So just his mere presence and killing things makes everyone kind of a coward, and I like that. Secondly, he has Taker of Heads. At the end of the combat phase, if any enemy models were slain by this unit's attacks in that combat phase, you can heal 1 wound. Like I said, he is my favorite unit, and I just think he's so cool. What's interesting about him, though, is that he can actually be taken in multiples. So you get 1 in the box. However, when you're building an army, you can actually put multiple into a single unit. Now, the important note on that one is that because of the wording of Taker of Heads, you'll still only heal 1 wound, no matter how many Khorgoraths in that unit kill enemy models. However, they can be a nice meat shield for dirt cheap in this faction. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to want like Bloodreavers to fill that role, that kind of thing, and that makes perfect sense. It does. But I have a special place for the Khorgorath, if I'm being perfectly honest. And so what we're going to do now is kind of take a step back now that we've examined the Warscrolls, kind of discuss the value of this box. So from our like 40,000 foot, bird's eye view, if you will, you get a ton of models, which is a lot of value in terms of your dollar. If you don't know, if you're fairly new to the game, this set in particular used to be the Chaos half of the first Age of Sigmar starter set, where Khorne was the enemy and you had some Stormcast Eternals on the other side. And right away, I think this set really nailed what Age of Sigmar was, which was a whole bunch of synergies and using keywords and exploring things that way. I think that makes this set very valuable. It's a great teaching tool. And honestly, if you're someone who wants to give demos at your local store to help build a group or something like that, this is a really good set for that. They're fun, engaging models. They're very easy to paint. You get a wide array of them. So you get everything from the big fat mighty Lord of Khorne. You get the Khorgorath if somebody wants a cool monster, and a bunch of dudes, right, who are very disposable, which is a very chaos thing. I will be honest with you, it is a mouthful that they put blood and gore into every stinking war scroll and rule. It is a mouthful. I know that I've probably made mistakes on this as far as, getting like Bloodstoker and Bloodsecrator mixed up. Understand, whatever's on the screen, that's what it is. This is why I don't play Khorne. But I do think it's an awesome set, because not only is it introducing you to the faction and the game in terms of, synergies and how to understand units and that kind of stuff, but also, like I said before, the painting thing is very simple. You get used to the kind of Khorne-like armor where there's a lot of like gold trim, or I should say brass trim over red is kind of this typical scheme, but you can paint them however you want. There's just a lot of cool things here for starting off in the hobby in terms of engaging different aspects of the brain so that you can kind of get used to what Warhammer is all about. Now, whenever it comes to discussing, like, is this a good starter set? I kind of have two questions, right? And so those two questions are, do the models that you get here represent the faction? Meaning, if I buy this set and then I start to expand into Khorne, the way that those models interact is radically different from what's in the starter. And secondly, do the models here, are they useful in the army? Like, are these things that I'm going to actually want even when I'm a full Blades of Khorne player? Well, the truth is, yes to both. They are fantastic. It's hard to argue with this one, so we'll go one at a time here. Do the models represent the faction? Yes, absolutely. Khorne is all about sacrificing the weak to root out the strong, kind of a thing. And so hurling lots of Bloodreavers and Blood Warriors at an enemy is absolutely what Khorne is all about. And especially when you get the Battle Tome and start playing it as a full army. I don't talk too much about Allegiance abilities because this is a product review, not necessarily an army review. But you are incentivized to bring a bunch of cheap dudes who all die, and that's part of your winning strategy. Like, that's your win condition, and I love it. It's so Khorne-like, and so it is a fantastic representation of what the greater Blades of Khorne army is like, I would say, personally, in terms of learning how to use synergies to maximize every unit's effectiveness, understanding that the bubbles or area of effect of certain heroes is very, very important. All of those things go together to making this a fantastic set. And as for the second question, are they actually useful in a full Blades of Khorne army? So, like, if I wanted to be a Blades of Khorne player and I bought this set because it looked cool, am I later on down the road actually going to use any of these models? And the answer to that is a huge emphatic yes. This is the first place any Blades of Khorne player should go, because there's no other way to get the Bloodstoker, the Bloodsecrator, and the Mighty Lord of Khorne. Actually, that's not true. The Mighty Lord of Khorne was released separately because they did make him Khorgis Cole, which is it's a character. Ignore me. But those are the only way to get those kind of secondary heroes, and they are so important to this faction, right? The Bloodsecrator and the Bloodstoker, mostly the Bloodstoker. I'll be honest with you. Nope, Bloodsecrator. Got that backwards again. This is why it took me so long to do this. This is going to drive me to drinking. So the Bloodsecrator is a fantastic piece, both for its big bubble of reroll successful spell casting for your opponent, and as well as, of course, +1 to all the melee weapon profiles. And that gets even better when you think about the fact that as you're army building, if you take anything from the Slaves to Darkness Battle Tome that can take a keyword, like Khorne, for example, that can become part of your faction. So what does that mean? if you grab this set and you grab the Start Collecting box for Slaves to Darkness, you have a really awesome start to an army where you get things like knights. Now the horses and the riders get additional attacks. Chaos warriors with more weapons that are much more like blood warriors than Bloodreavers. You get all kinds of really cool models. The point is, all these chaos armies are fantastic because they have access to pretty much everything in the Slaves to Darkness wheelhouse as well because of the way keywords work. Remember, all these things, their keywords triggers for synergy was Khorne Mortal. And so anything that you can find in this game basically that has Khorne Mortal, which is quite a few things actually, can benefit from these synergies. What I'm saying is, that's a lot of jargon for a new person, I apologize. This box is fantastic. You're going to use these units no matter how you build your Khorne army, at least some of them. The mechanics of the faction reward you for having cheap troops who die, which would be your Bloodreavers, as well as using complex synergies between your heroes, of which you get 3 fantastic ones. I can't promise you that you're going to be using the Khorgorath every single game. I know I would, but I also lose a lot. However, I will say that the heroes that you get in this set and the things that you learn from using their synergies and model placement and that kind of stuff is going to set you on a great path to learning the game and really engaging with the faction. So I've rambled on for quite a bit there. To put it really simply at the end, I love this set. In fact, even in just reviewing this, I was like, man, I could build a Khorne army. I could do that. That wouldn't be too hard. Because I'm a sucker, and every single time I make one of these videos, I fall in love with the faction that I'm recording over. But the truth is, the Khorne stuff is phenomenal. It has one of the easiest entry points into the game. This is a solid value. None of these units are like partial units. They're all maxed out. You got 10 Bloodreavers, 5 Blood Warriors, and they just work. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's great for teaching. It's great for learning the game and the faction specifically. And I really can't ask much more of that. Now, in terms of rebuyability, when it comes to like, if you've already started Blades of Khorne, would you buy multiple of these? Because half the units in the box are heroes, you're going to see diminishing returns on its value. So what do I mean by that? Like, you don't need 3 or 4 Mighty Lords of Khorne. Those you won't use, right? But you could go with something like 2 Bloodsecrators, and then of course the Bloodreavers and Blood Warriors are fantastic troops. You will probably use those quite a bit. Things like the Khorgorath, again, like I said, not everyone loves them. I actually do, and so that one's kind of a swing. That's up to you. But ultimately, because there are so many heroes in the box and that makes up so much of the value of it, there is going to be a certain point where you're like, okay, why don't I just buy a box of 20 Bloodreavers or buy a box of 10 Blood Warriors, and it becomes more cost saving to do that. But until you reach that point, this is a phenomenal set, and I do encourage you to go check it out. So friends, thank you so much for joining me on this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what box I haven't covered yet that you would like me to in the comments down below, and I will absolutely do that next. Thank you all so much for watching. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.